The Mr. Excel podcast is sponsored by Easy Excel. Learn Excel from Mr. Excel podcast, episode 1799, Gantt chart by hour. Hey, welcome back to the Mr. Excel Netcast. I'm Bill Jelen. I was out on Twitter the other day and saw this note. Have used your YouTube how to create a Gantt chart in Excel. How do you change the scale to hours? I've tried everything. I'm not even sure they were talking about my video, but I knew that I had a Gantt chart video out in YouTube about using conditional formatting. But that was where we had dates going across the top, a start date and an end date. Now we have hours. And so we have hours across the top here. I'm going to format this, Control 1. On the number tab, I'll go with custom and just get rid of the minutes to try and make that a little bit smaller, 6 a.m. Also the alignment, we will make that go vertical like that. Click OK. Then we can have the columns be a little bit less wide so they all fit on the screen. Conditional formatting, we're going to use a formula in conditional formatting. It's easier to build that formula right here in the spreadsheet. The formula is equal and two conditions have to be true. The start time of the project, so we'll click on B2. I'm going to press F4 1, 2, 3 times to lock that down to column B. So is the start time less than or equal to this hour? And we'll click up here. I'll press F4 1, 2 times to lock it down to just row 1. That's our first test. The other test is to see if the end time, C2, and I'll press F4 3 times there, is greater than or equal to, I really need like 659, but what I'm going to do is use the cell to the right of us and press F4 twice to lock it down to the $1, row 1. And what we should get is a bunch of trues and falses, and the trues indicate that the event is happening that hour. So the staff meeting goes from 8 to 9. We have a true there at 8. Everything else is false. Power Excel class from 1 to 6. Trues in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and falses everywhere else. Once we have that working, we're going to copy the formula for the first cell from the formula bar, Control C to copy it to the clipboard, and then Alt O D for conditional formatting. New rule, use a formula, and paste that formula in. We will use a fill, maybe like a nice green or something like that. Click OK. Click OK. Click OK. And now at this point, we can get rid of the formulas themselves. We don't need the falses and trues there. We can actually just click the delete key and format column width, go really narrow like 3, and we have our Gantt chart working in Excel, provided that there are no partial events. What if a project started at 9 and went to 11:30 or 11:40 or something like that? Do we want to highlight the next block if it's more than 29 minutes, more than half an hour? So that dramatically complicates things. I created a couple of helper rows here to take these times and convert them to minutes of the day. So in a day, there's 24 hours times 60 minutes, 1440. So I took that 6 a.m. times 1440 to give me the start minute, and then the end minute is 59 plus that number. Same thing over here. We'll take the start time, multiply it by 1440, and the end time, and multiply it by 1440, and then try and build some sort of a formula here to figure out if the intersection of those two is greater than 29 minutes. Now, my first attempt at this was a formula that was based on Mike Girvin's book, where we take the indirect of the start time and the end time, do an intersection of the indirect of these two times. So these two times as an indirect, intersected with these two times as an indirect, is going to try and find the rows that they have in common and see if there's more than 29 rows. I tried to send that through to count blank, but to my chagrin, it's not just counting once per row, it's counting all 16,384 cells in the row. And so while it would have been possible to check to see if this result was more than 475,136, which is 29 rows times 16,384 cells, I realized, whoa, wait a second, this is just going to be way too slow. There has to be a better way to build this formula. So I abandoned this method and started to come up with a simpler method. And really, it's interesting how much this got simplified. If I take the minimum value of the two yellow cells, the ending time here and the ending time here, and then subtract the maximum value of the two starting cells. All right, so the minimum value of these two is minute 419. The maximum time of these two is minute 480. Take the 419 minus 480 and see if that's greater than 29 was my goal. And you can see here, most of them out here are negative, but we have a few that seem to match. Even with this 9:30 here, we're getting the 8 o'clock time and the 9 o'clock time because there's 30 minutes. All right, so that formula equal min of the two yellow cells minus the max of the two orange cells. We want to do that compared to 29, so we just simply add a greater than 29. Again, copy this whole formula from the clipboard, Control-C, and then Alt-O-D. I've already set up this formula, so I'll just edit the rule, paste that in there, change it to green, and click OK, and it will work. We can get rid of those formulas now. It's ugly to have these two helper rows and helper columns. We could just simply format row hide and format column hide, but they're still there and still ugly. If you wanted to, you could take that formula that I had in the last one and change it to this formula, which does not use the two helper rows or helper columns. It's actually taking C2 times 1440. The formula gets a little bit longer, but of course it would work. Alt-O-D, edit the rule, paste it all in there, and then we don't actually need to show the helper rows or columns. Finally end up with this example here. So let's just do a little test. Let's say that project B goes from 9 a.m. to 10:15. So that is only one block because we're not using more than half of the 10:30. I'll change this to 10:31. And then it highlights that second block. So interesting. If you need to break it down by partial hours, then you're stuck with this longer formula. But of course, we could always just go back and use the AND formula to test for two conditions if we're looking for entire hours. All right, so there you go. A couple of different ways to do a Gantt chart by hour. I want to thank you for stopping by. We'll see you next time for another netcast from Mr. Excel.